However, I must say I'm not being biased. And so our favourite is probably...
Good afternoon everybody and welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, if you've been following our channel, you will know that we've recently just come back from a trip down to Victoria/Melbourne. So we thought what better to do than make a video expressing certain points that we either didn't expect to be so similar to where we live here on the Sunshine Coast and in Queensland in general, to things that are very different. So I want to say with a pinch of salt, if there is anybody watching from Queensland, Victoria, this is just a little bit of fun. It's nothing too serious, but I think it'd be a good little video as us kind of being outsiders, being dirty little poms, enabling us to come with an approach of a third party, an unbiased opinion. Just for reference, we do have a resident water dragon in the garden, so if you see little Pico perking up, he's just patrolling the area. So with all that being said, as I mentioned, a little bit of fun, nothing too serious. Let's get into today's video.
Point number one's going to be our first impressions. Now, I don't know about you, but my first impression was definitely that there's a hell of a lot more people, even compared to Brisbane.
Yeah.
That was a huge difference. As soon as we landed, we came out the airport, so many more people. So that was definitely a big noticeable difference. And of course, the temperature difference. Mostly, it felt hot at the time. I think we arrived and it was quite a warm day. However, there was a breeze, and it's a breeze that we don't tend to get here on the Sunshine Coast. And that's exactly why we went. So for anybody that has turned around and said, oh, why didn't you go in the summer? We get sun most of the year round here in the Sunshine Coast. It rains a lot as well, but we get a lot of sun. And so we were actually looking for a little bit of a breath of fresh air, literally. And so that's what we got when we went to Victoria.
The second point we're going to talk about on the list is one that is very controversial. It's a very spoken about topic. It's a high engagement. I can imagine in the comment sections they're already firing off. It is the weather. So the weather is very, very different, as many people will know, and we experienced firsthand. Over the period of a year, Melbourne and Victoria will experience 4 very different varying seasons. Whereas in Queensland, especially where we're living on the Sunshine Coast, it being subtropical, you pretty much get hot and hotter as your seasons. So yeah. Now, this is not saying that if you do live in a place, the Sunshine Coast, you don't acclimatise, as although it is still hot, if you were coming from a cold climate.
Demo.
No, that's not saying if you don't. With that being said, if you do live in a place like Sunshine Coast, for some of the year, you do still feel very cold. This is very apparent when it comes to those 4 to 3 months, I would say, in the coldest part of the year. We won't go anywhere near the pool as it would feel far too cold. And that's coming from 2 ponds. Mind that, we are massive weaklings nowadays. But one thing I did find really interesting when researching and writing up this video is that Melbourne's average rainfall over a year period is 600 to 650 millimetres of rain, apparently is what it says. In Queensland, and specifically I think it said Brisbane, on average, they would get 1,100 to 1,200, so you would double your rainfall. Now, to a lot of battle-hardened Aussies like yourselves watching, this would be an obvious, but being a POM, I wouldn't have expected that. I would have imagined the place that's the colder climate would have way more rain than the place, oh, it's tropical and it's so sunny, so it might seem as an obvious, but to us, if I was to move over, I can imagine there's a lot more Brits that go over expecting heavier rain in a place like Melbourne than they would in the more northern states. Taking Queensland, for example, speaking about Brisbane. So yeah, bit of a shock. But it really did intrigue me reading comments on our Victoria vlog, as there was a good mix of people either saying, I live in Victoria currently and my dream is to move to a hotter climate, Queensland, Brisbane, that area. Whereas there were a good amount of people saying in the comments, I'm from Brisbane, or I've moved up to Brisbane and it was too hot and the humidity was too much for me, so I had to move back down south. For us personally, we do enjoy the hotter climate, the Sunshine Coast, as it's why we moved from the UK, but I must say that weather in Melbourne felt very similar to the UK. I just think their summer is a lot better than the UK's would be, but I can see how POMs who might move there feel quite at home in that climate.
Point number 3 is the lifestyle and daily life. Now, what we did notice is they're actually very similar in the sense of if you live in Melbourne or you live in Brisbane, it's very bustling, busy. You won't see people without shoes on. You look crazy if you wear no shoes in the cities. But then when you go to the smaller coastal towns, the Great Ocean Road, Apollo Bay and Lawn, these places again were a lot more laid back, just like it is right up here on the Sunshine Coast. And it's probably a similar distance from the city. It took us about an hour and a half to get from Melbourne to the Great Ocean Road, and it's about the same to get from Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast. So you do realise they are very similar in that sense. So I personally feel you can get the same vibes from whether you live in Victoria or Queensland. It literally just depends on where you are.
Point number 4 on the list is the coffee culture. Now, this is a big one, and I don't mean to start any debates, but we're going to try and keep it brief. Not trying to cause any arguments with this one, but what we experienced. Overall, we had a few coffees down in Victoria and Melbourne, and I've got to say, we didn't have a bad one out of the bunch. I don't know whether this is factual, but from what I've read and what I understand, maybe on average down in Victoria and Melbourne, the average coffee that you have might be better than in places like Queensland. Only speaking from personal experience, we have had some fantastic coffees in Brisbane and in the Sunshine Coast. But that is with the pinch of salt that we do live on the Sunshine Coast, and we've lived here for the last year and a half, so we've had a lot more coffees. So the chance of us having a great coffee is higher as we've tried more places. But jumping back to Victoria and Melbourne, I cannot fault any coffee that I had down there, and there were some particularly delicious ones, but nothing that stood out to me as like, wow, this is incredible. One thing's for certain, we've been all over Australia. We've been over to Perth, we've been down to Sydney areas, we've been down to Melbourne, Victoria, we've been up to Cairns, and I've got to say, I've had good coffees in all of these places. I think it's just safe to say Australia has very good coffee.
Point number 5 is a big thing that surprised us. Now, overall, if we was to pick one thing that surprised us on our trip, I think we would both agree that that would be the architecture and the buildings. Even in the coastal towns of the Great Ocean Road, we were very surprised to see such amazing buildings. Even the homes, they all look like they should be on Grand Design. Now, that probably tells you it's a very wealthy area. They've all had architects build the houses. We live on the Sunshine Coast, and there's a lot of very nice houses here too, but there was something about the buildings down there that I just feel they were very well designed. But also in the city and Port Melbourne, where we went to, the buildings there were very interesting. We saw some buildings and homes that did look very similar to the UK. We saw the Victoria terrace houses. They still seem bigger than the UK, but not quite as they are in the UK. They are very much their own thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Very interesting to drive through those kind of places and see those buildings. And so you definitely see a great difference in architecture in the city and out the city compared to Brisbane. There's definitely a lot more newer builds up here. You definitely see a lot more diverse and range of different building materials down there, don't you?
I think so. Point number 6 on the list is the vibe and the people. I am beginning to realise that the more we speak in this video, it's becoming a Great Ocean Road, Sunshine Coast kind of comparison, and then Melbourne and Brisbane comparison. So we're kind of sectioning the two into different areas of what we're speaking about. Let's take the people, for example. In Brisbane and Melbourne, you're not really in the kind of area where you would stop and speak to people. Everybody's pretty much heads down and walking or moving. Everybody's got to be somewhere where they're not currently. That's just city life in general. It's not the usual kind of spot where you would stop, relax and talk. Especially when we're looking at the time frame we were in Melbourne. It was pretty much slapdash, move on, quick, go. And if Melbourne is anything like the UK, as soon as that sun comes out in the UK, people are a lot friendlier. So I want to know in the comments, are places like Melbourne like the UK in the sense when that sun comes out, everybody's a lot more glowing, a lot more smiley, in comparison to those kind of days where it feels overcast and you're feeling a bit glum? As soon as that sun comes out in the UK, you honestly, beer gardens are full, people are smiling, people are high-fiving. One downside is shirts are off, and that's the men. Just to clarify, that's the men. But yeah, that is a point that is quite interesting. We weren't there for long enough to experience that maybe change in annual weather and how that affects the vibe and the people. But from what we experienced, I've got to say those small laneways through Melbourne are something that Brisbane definitely lacked. That vibe, that kind of culture, that abundance of smells, walking down small alleyways and people being all crammed in chairs. It felt very European. Now, this might be something that does exist in Brisbane, but I haven't seen too much of it, whereas pretty much every single street you turn down, there was a table set up, people were sat there either eating, drinking. You even mentioned how you could get a coffee at 6 o'clock at night. That isn't something that we've really seen in Brisbane or in Queensland. So yeah, it is very interesting when you do look at the comparison of those two places. But then jumping onto the point of when we were travelling the Great Ocean Road, in comparison to the Sunshine Coast, people were a lot more friendly. If we were sat somewhere in a morning grabbing a coffee, I noticed a lot more people were waving, saying hello, stopping to have a small talk. And that is just the culture of living in a place that is kind of not rural, but definitely not as urban as a city. One fantastic perk that people wouldn't have seen on the vlogs that we did experience is being in a place like Lorne or Apollo Bay during a more off-peak season time. Everybody that was in the areas, in the towns, in the cafes were locals. So people were walking past and waving and how's the kids and this. It felt very small town, cosy feeling. So that was a really nice experience to be sat at a coffee table and the cafe owner waving and smiling and talking to every single person who came past. It almost felt we're in an episode of, what is it? Neighbours or Home and Away. It felt that kind of feeling being in a soap opera with less drama.
Point number 7 is the diversity on cuisine/culture. There was so many more food options just from what we saw. Now, to be honest, that might mean that we've got to do a lot more exploring on Brisbane potentially. And our time in Melbourne was very limited, but we did notice there are a lot more food options, even let's just say a lot more Greek food, for example.
Yes.
So many more Greek food. Even when we went on the night out to Graceland, they also had like a Greek evening and it was such a laugh. If you haven't seen that video, I think that's 2 videos back from this. That was such a great night. No, we haven't experienced anything like that here in Queensland. I'm sure we could find it, but yeah, we just thought that was really quite cool to experience as it's not something you see every day up here. We have heard that there's a Greek festival that's on in Queensland, which we definitely need to get to one year. I know that's pretty big, but from what we just experienced, I think the Greek population is a lot larger, so I'm guessing that there's more of these events down there.
Point number 8 is the sheer size of Melbourne and Victoria and how populated that area really is. I think somebody actually commented in our comment section saying that between Sydney and Melbourne alone is 1/3 of the population of Australia. So yeah, there's a lot to do and a lot to see, and obviously we missed quite a lot in the small time frame that we were there. Listing off just a few things that we definitely missed. Lockhart's Gorge. We did actually pull up in the car that we were in to the car park, but if you saw how the weather was when we were at the 12 Apostles, it started going even crazier and we didn't manage to get down, but that would have been a fantastic spot that we really wanted to see. On top of that, there's places like the Grampians as well that were highly recommended, but we didn't manage to get there. Another one that was mentioned so many times in the comment section, I think it's the Dandenong Ranges. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. But again, from what we've seen on Google, that place looks absolutely incredible and a spot that we would have loved to have gone to. Moving on into the city in Melbourne, I'm sure there was 1,000 things that we missed. I actually did say this in the video, the fact that we live on the Sunshine Coast and have done for the last year and a half, and when you speak to people outside of the Sunshine Coast, they probably go, oh, there's not much to do there, there's not much to see. We've lived here for a year and a half. We do these videos weekly and we're still exploring and seeing new things here on the Sunshine Coast. So obviously we were going to miss so many things when we were down in Melbourne. We could spend 1,000 years there and still miss some things. And another thing that we did miss out on, not so much a location, but an experience that we will be aiming to do this year, is going to an AFL game. Now, one was actually on, but we didn't know until we arrived of the evening it was on. We saw everybody wearing the scarves. I think it was Collingwood that were playing. We could have gone to it, but we didn't know it was actually on at that time. But that is something that we would really like to experience firsthand. So yeah, another big comparison that when you're up in places like Brisbane, everybody speaks about the rugby league, but when you're down in Melbourne, it's all about the AFL, and I feel we really missed out on that opportunity, and that could have been a fantastic experience. But we will do something like that this year. So if you do want to see that, let us know who we should go and watch in the comment section, and also subscribe if you've not already.
So point number 9 is an interesting one. Which place would we recommend if somebody was moving to Australia?
Moving. Ooh.
I think it would really depend on what somebody's looking for. For example, if you're coming from England, it depends if you're looking for that complete lifestyle switch up, if you're looking for more of a laid back lifestyle, whether you're coming for job opportunities. There's so many different factors. I think coming from England, it would be very different to move to the Sunshine Coast. It's a huge switch in terms of weather. A lot of people move here and realise how hot it really is, and it can be quite fatiguing to live in the heat all year round. I guess you've got issues if you live in the cold full time, And you've got issues if you live in the heat full time. It's just different problems, but same problems at the same time. Joe mentioned before, somebody that lived in Victoria moved up here and ended up moving back down just simply because they couldn't cope with the humidity. And I think that would be quite common in people that have grown up in colder climates. That was one of the biggest reasons for my birthday why I wanted to go and experience some cooler weather. However, I imagine there's a lot more job opportunities that are probably a lot more better paid down in Victoria, so it really does depend on what you're coming from. However, I must say, I'm not being biased. I think overall we would both agree that if we was to advise somebody to come to move to Australia, I personally would advise them to move to Queensland.
If I was to give my opinion of somebody moving here, I would probably say it fully depends, as Cody mentioned, on your situation and your circumstances. This is visible by people who maybe live in Melbourne wanting to move to Perth, people in Perth wanting to move to Cairns, people in Cairns wanting to move to Sydney. It is completely dependent on your circumstances. If you're moving from a country that is absolutely boiling hot, maybe there are people who are coming over on visas for a different experience and they're from South America and they might move to Melbourne as they want to live in that bustling city with all the different cultures, all the different food opportunities, the work opportunities, but then also being able to go for a surf as well and just embracing Aussie culture. Not so much the heat. So yeah, fully dependent. I'm going to sit on the fence with that one as it depends on where you're coming from.
Our final point of the video is the verdict on Queensland and Victoria. Now, this is just me personally, guys. Overall, I prefer the Queensland weather patterns. That's just me right now. That might not be me forever, but currently I do like the heat all year round. Whereas I feel if I did spend time in Victoria all year round, it would actually make me miss my family more. Not having that change up in lifestyle and then not having your family. So just me personally, I do like the subtropical climate.
When you live somewhere that is subtropical, you can kind of lie to yourself when you come from England and say, I'm just on a great big holiday. I don't miss family because I'm on a holiday. It's all good. Everything's fine. But in reality, Cody said, living in Melbourne, when you get those cold glum days, I want my mum.
Another point would be we absolutely love how green Brisbane is and even Queensland as a whole. Now, we know that we missed a lot of the green parts of Melbourne, but we did some research and it is very clear, even when you fly over both places, how much more green and vibrant it is in Queensland, especially here on the Sunshine Coast. Now, if you know me and Joe well enough, you know that we love our nature, we love the bush, we love walking and hiking, and that is just everything that we love. But even moving on to Brisbane as a city, there's so much greenery integrated in the buildings, and that was quite similar to what we experienced in Singapore, which is another one of our favourite cities for that same reason, that there's greenery everywhere you go. We didn't so much see that in Melbourne, but I know there's places, I think it's South Yarra, that we didn't get to that is very green. So yeah, there's still a lot that we didn't see, but after doing some research, it is clear that there is one that is greener than the other.
And I know that that might seem a controversial point, but when you do look at the buildings and the interwoven greenery throughout the city, it does seem a lot more present in Brisbane. Now, we might be wrong about that experience, but there is a difference between the subtropical greenery that we are imagining in our minds in comparison to there being a park. Now, we do know that Melbourne is one of the best cities for having parklands. These are more kind of man-made areas to kind of reside in and relax in. Now, these are fantastic and do show greenery within the city, but when I mean the kind of greenery and lush tropicalness, I always imagine I Am Legend. I imagined if you left Brisbane alone for like a couple of years, it'd just become a great big rainforest. It would. Do you know what I mean?
You love the wildness.
That's it. Whereas Melbourne, I imagine that the parks might grow a little bit grassier, but the jungliness woven into the city, as Cody mentioned, it's what we love about Brisbane. It is one of our favourite cities, along with Singapore, as mentioned previously.
And so that has been our 10 points today. I think we could have covered at least another 10 points, so do let us know what you think we missed in the comments below, and make sure you do comment with your verdict, because we love hearing what everybody's got to say. We've not been everywhere. Some of you guys have had completely different experiences, and so we would love to hear about it in the comments. Now, before we go, we have got something to open. We're not sure who has sent this, so let's grab it and see what's been sent to the P.O Box. So this has been sent from Shane Black. Thank you very much, Shane. Let's see what's inside the box. We have took the tape off to make it a little bit easier.
What's in the box?
Oh, is there something for Pico in here? Because look at him.
Didn't get the reference.
Oh, sorry, what is that?
So good. See if anybody knows in the comments. Oh my gosh.
there's a lot of things in here. Oh, of course, this thing's for Pico. Unless this is for me. Oh my gosh.
Oh no.
What's happened there?
I don't know what's happened, but I think they've crushed.
Oh no.
Oh, they're eggs made of icing. It must have been for Easter.
Oh, how cool are them? Maybe.
I'm so sorry, Shane, if you're watching. Maybe avert your eyes, but thank you so much. The idea is that they've made it here. This one's in some form.
Yay, we can eat that one.
And I can hear M&Ms or something in the bottom of
Oh,
them.
very nice.
Stubby holders.
Love that. The Complete Adventures of Blinky Bill. Is this an Aussie classic book? If you've read this book, comment below and let us know. Is it worth a read? Oh, how lovely. Thank you so much. All these little things. Oh, there's a card in the box. I'm going to have to give it a read. How sweet. Dear Cody, Joe and Pico, I've been following from the near start of your time down under. I've watched all of you grow and absolutely take to life here. I'm grateful for your content and the way of life. It's opened my eyes to things I generally take for granted. My latest saying is, why wait to be given your flowers when you can go out and plant a garden? Lots of love. That is so true.
I love that.
He's put sorry for about the handwriting. That's beautiful handwriting. Very nice. Much better than what mine would.
So you can say better than mine.
Yeah,
Much
better than Joe's. Thank you so much for the card. That is so lovely. Oh my gosh, more toys for Pico.
Tennis balls for Pico. I've never seen him play tennis, but we'll try. I don't know how he'd hold the racket. Back roads and detours.
Wow, the ultimate backroads and detours Australia. Oh my goodness, what a gift. That is absolutely unbelievable. Oh my gosh, we have got so much more of Australia yet to see, guys. And so this is definitely going to come in so handy. Oh, Shane, thank you so much. Well, thank you for the box of gifts, Shane. That is absolutely wonderful. If anybody else would like to send anything to our P.O Box, that will come up on screen for you right now. And it's probably in the description of this video as well. We just want to say a big thank you to anybody that has bought a t-shirt or a cap. Joe, where is your cap today? He's got the t-shirt on, so it's all good.
Where's your cap? I've got the t-shirt on.
And we just want to say a big thank you to the members. You guys are wonderful. If you would like your name to come up at the end of the video, be sure to join our membership program. Well, thank you very much for watching again. Sending you all lots of love, and I hope you're all very, very well. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Adios.
Signing out, Pico.